In a city where racism persists like a shadow that never dissipates, the upscale restaurant attracts an affluent clientele, drawn to its elegant atmosphere, large windows overlooking the street, and the promise of a refined dining experience. The walls are adorned with modern paintings in vibrant colors, while the sparkling chandeliers hanging from the ceiling cast a soft light that seems to envelop every corner of the place. This lavish decor creates an illusion of sophistication and modernity, making it seem as though this place is a sanctuary of culture and class. But behind the golden doors, a much darker reality hides, an insidious and deeply ingrained culture of discrimination, masked by the veneer of so-called friendliness. The restaurant staff, though skilled and dedicated professionals, find themselves trapped in a rigid and unjust system that values appearance over humanity. The head waiter, Pierre, a man in his 40s, serves as an example of this mentality. His meticulous posture and authoritative gaze suggest great experience, but also blind conformity. While he is known for his professionalism and efficiency, his attitudes and judgments toward clients are often tainted by racial and social prejudices. Black clients or those from modest backgrounds are often treated with cold indifference, sometimes even contempt, while white upper-class clients are greeted with excessive smiles, exaggerated politeness, and impeccable service. Pierre embodies this implicit social hierarchy, where privileges are reserved for those who conform to an ideal of racial purity and economic status. One particular evening, a man enters the restaurant, disrupting the delicate balance of this social microcosm. He is Charles, a black veteran in his 50s, whose imposing presence and natural dignity immediately capture the attention of the other patrons. His clothes, though modest, bear the mark of the honor he has always held for his military service. His upright posture, proud gaze, and confident step speak of a life of sacrifice and respect. But what he feels the moment he steps through the restaurant's threshold is the heavy weight of silent judgments, floating in the air like an invisible fog. Charles is not here to be noticed or to provoke. He simply hopes to enjoy a pleasant moment, away from the troubles of daily life, reminiscing about a time when he served his country with pride. However, from the moment he enters, he is ignored by the staff. The waiters barely glance at him, as though he were invisible, while other customers are warmly welcomed and shown to their tables without hesitation. Pierre, upon seeing Charles enter, immediately stands up and whispers to a waitress, "This is not the place for him." His words, cold and laced with contempt, echo through the space, spreading palpable humiliation. Charles, though aware of the unfair treatment being directed at him, remains silent, his heart heavy with the pain of an injustice he has endured too often. He remembers his comrades, their bravery, the equality they fought for. But here in this restaurant today, he feels like an intruder, like an unwanted shadow. Minutes pass, and Pierre's disdain becomes increasingly evident. Other clients of a certain standing arrive and are greeted warmly, their requests promptly fulfilled. Charles, dignified, decides not to succumb to this humiliation. He stands up from his seat and calmly walks to the counter to ask for a table. Pierre, with a false smile and barely concealed arrogance, responds curtly, "We don't have a seat for you here. Perhaps at another restaurant." These words, sharp and devoid of humanity, strike Charles like a punch. The embarrassment that takes hold of him is deep, but he retains his dignity. At that moment, murmurs begin to grow louder in the room. Some customers start to react, showing discomfort at this unjust treatment. Among them is Maya, a determined young woman who has recently spoken out to defend the rights of the oppressed. Present that evening, she watches the scene with a silent rage building within her. Rising from her own table, she approaches Pierre, her gaze sharp and her voice trembling with fury. "How can you treat a veteran with such contempt? This man served our country." The silence that follows is heavy and oppressive. All the customers' eyes turn to Pierre, then to Charles, then to Maya. Each seems to weigh the words and actions, shocked by the brutality of the injustice they have just witnessed. Pierre, clearly cornered by the situation, attempts a clumsy defense. "I'm just following the establishment's rules." But Maya, stronger than ever, retorts, "Rules should never justify discrimination. This restaurant should be a place of dignity for all, regardless of their appearance or past." Her voice rings with such force that it begins to rally other customers, who, little by little, start to murmur in support of Charles. The tension mounts, and the murmurs gradually turn into a collective cry of resistance against the injustice that has unfolded before them. A customer, a respected businessman, stands up and declares, his voice loud and assured, "I refuse to dine in a place that humiliates a man for his past. I expected quality service, but what I see here is unacceptable." His words reverberate through the room like thunder, and their impact is immediate. A heavy silence follows before other customers, moved by the injustice of the situation, begin to stand up. It's a domino effect. Murmurs of disapproval spread, and gradually, several people leave their tables, signaling their support for Charles. Some, fists clenched, whisper words of encouragement to Charles, while others, more discreet, move away, but their act of solidarity is equally clear. Pierre, realizing that the situation is slipping out of his control and that the order in the dining room is rapidly deteriorating, attempts to regain control. He stands upright, displaying a facade of calm, but the rising anger among the customers hits him head-on. He tries to maintain his authority, to wave away the growing unrest with a gesture, but the tension is too palpable. What he thought was a manageable situation has become a real turning point, and the restaurant he has so strictly managed is transforming before his eyes into a place where human values, rather than image, are taking center stage. The waitress, witnessing the injustice unfolding before her, then makes a decision. The gestures of disapproval multiply around her, and she can no longer remain a bystander. With courage she didn't know she had, she turns to Charles. Her eyes filled with compassion, she approaches him and, in a soft but clear voice, she apologizes. "I'm sorry, sir. Your table is ready." Her words, simple but full of sincerity, bring a glimmer of hope to Charles's heart. He feels the warmth of support, a light that pierces through the darkness of the humiliation he has just experienced. However, despite this act of empathy, a part of Charles remains marked. Though he is grateful, a certain dignity prevents him from accepting this compensation at any cost. "Thank you, but I don't want to be a burden to those around me," he says. His voice trembles slightly, but his gaze is firm, his dignity intact. He refuses to let the prejudices of others bring him down, and he doesn't want to impose his presence any further in a place where he feels unwelcome. His statement, strong but filled with pain, resonates in the room, fueling the growing collective awareness. The movement of solidarity spreads, and the murmurs in the room, growing louder, eventually catch the attention of the restaurant's manager, Mr. LeBlanc. Alerted by the rising agitation and the heated exchanges that can be heard beyond the whispers, he enters the dining room with a firm step, a severe look tempered with common sense, years of experience marking every line of his face. Seeing the scene unfolding before him, he immediately understands that the restaurant's values, which he has always defended and protected with pride, are cracking under the weight of Pierre's attitude. The shock is real, but it also carries with it the resolve to restore human dignity, one that must be the standard in every space, whether private or public. Without hesitation, Mr. LeBlanc steps forward, his face grave but resolute. This restaurant will not tolerate discrimination, no matter a person's appearance. "You are welcome here, sir." Mr. LeBlanc's words resonate through the room with strength and conviction. It's a decisive turning point, a statement that disrupts the tense atmosphere and brings a breath of hope to Charles and to those who dared to stand up against the injustice. A respectful silence precedes a wave of applause that rises in the room, reinforcing the idea that solidarity and mutual respect must prevail, even in places where social class and appearances are expected to take precedence. Pierre, caught off guard and visibly stung by the situation, tries one last time to justify himself. I thought this is what the clientele expected." But his hastily delivered excuse sounds completely hollow to the customers. His arrogance becomes even more evident as murmurs of disapproval rise like an echo against his behavior. In just a few minutes, he has become the embodiment of intolerance, and his attempt at escape only increases the tension. Mr. LeBlanc, leaving no room for evasion, turns to Pierre, his features drawn by an anger he no longer hides. "You've confused the expectations of the public with your own prejudices. This restaurant should never be a place where people are judged based on their past or appearance. We should welcome everyone who crosses our threshold, without distinction. His words are sharp and firm, each one carrying the weight of his authority and deep convictions. He makes it clear to Pierre, and to the customers, that there is no place for discrimination in this establishment, and that every person, regardless of their background, deserves the same respect and attention. Charles, though his heart is still heavy with conflicting emotions, finds within himself the strength to speak. He rises slightly, his voice trembling but full of wisdom, and says, "I am here to share a meal and memories, not to be judged." His words, simple yet powerful, touch every person present in the room. The struggle he has fought throughout his life for equality and human dignity comes to life in his words. The customers, now united in a common cause, nod in agreement, their support expressed in the light of solidarity in their eyes. This moment marks a turning point in the evening, transforming the humiliation into an act of collective resistance and restoring justice in a place that until now seemed ruled by injustice and discrimination. Maya, inspired by Charles's courage, approaches him with a smile full of kindness, her warm gaze reflecting the empathy she deeply feels. "You deserve to be treated with respect, sir. We are all here to celebrate diversity and inclusion, not to judge by superficial criteria," she declares in a strong, clear voice, filled with palpable conviction. Her words strike a deep chord in the hearts of many present in the room, awakening a sense of solidarity that had remained latent until then. One by one, the customers who had silently observed the unfolding injustice rise to their feet, their attitude now one of solidarity. They join their voices with Maya's, offering Charles their moral support, and in an instant, the room transforms into a space where unity and human dignity take precedence over judgment and hatred. Mr. Leblanc, who had observed the scene with growing intensity, finally speaks in a firm but measured voice. "Pierre, you need to step back and reflect on your actions. This restaurant has built its reputation on creating an environment that welcomes everyone. If you cannot align yourself with these core values, then perhaps your place here is being questioned," he states, his authoritative and irrevocable tone leaving no room for dispute. These words hit Pierre squarely. He is now faced with the reality of his choices and their consequences, a moment of truth that shakes his certainties and behaviors. His face pales, and he remains still, unsure of how to react to the magnitude of the situation. The customers, who had stood up to support Charles, slowly return to their seats, but the atmosphere in the room has changed. The injustice that had reigned moments before is now replaced by a collective breath of solidarity. A group of young women, moved by the event and by Charles's dignity, decides to approach him. One of them, a young woman with sparkling eyes full of hope, steps forward and gives him a sincere smile. "We would like to offer you a drink to celebrate your courage," she says, her voice gentle yet full of respect. This gesture is not only symbolic but a concrete act of support that melts away some of the coldness of the initial situation. Charles, although deeply moved by this unexpected gesture, remains modest. "Thank you, but that's not necessary. Your support is already more than enough," he replies, his voice filled with gratitude and dignity. However, Mr. Leblanc, touched by the evolution of the atmosphere and eager to give the evening an even more symbolic dimension, approaches Charles. With calm but benevolent authority, he offers a gesture of recognition. "Please accept our invitation, sir. Tonight, we will dine together. Your story deserves to be heard, and you are not alone." This simple but powerful gesture brings Charles a form of comfort he never imagined finding in such a place. From that moment on, the tension in the room begins to slowly dissipate, giving way to a warmer atmosphere, filled with empathy and mutual respect. The customers, eager to learn more about this man who embodies so many values of courage and dignity, gather around Charles. They ask him questions about his military service, his experiences, his struggles, and his life journey. Each question is an invitation to share a part of his story, and Charles finally feels recognized and respected, not only for his past as a veteran but also for the man he is today. He realizes that the humiliation he endured only strengthened his inner strength, and that he is now living a moment of recognition he had never known in his life. As the service continues and the conversations around him become more animated, Pierre, now alone in his reflections, begins to realize the scope of his actions. He replays every gesture he made, every word he spoke. The weight of his conscience grows heavier, and he understands that the task he had thought was merely a question of managing the establishment was actually much more complex. He sees that his prejudices not only jeopardized his own future at the restaurant, but also created a wound in the soul of a man who deserved respect. The evening ends on an unexpected note. Charles, after hearing the testimonies of support, rises from his chair, emotion visible on his face, and speaks to thank everyone who stood by him. "It is not only my dignity that has been restored tonight," he says in a strong, emotional voice, "but that of all those who are treated unfairly. We all have a role to play in this fight for equality." His words, heavy with meaning and bearing a universal truth, resonate in the hearts of everyone present. Another customer, an older man, rises as well and, in an act of solidarity, proposes a toast. "To humanity, to equality, and to the future we are building together." The room, in one unified motion, raises their glasses, clinking them together in a symbolic gesture of unity and celebration of collective victory. Pierre, though still stung by the events of the evening, begins to perceive the stakes of change. He knows the road will be long and fraught with challenges, but he makes an important decision. In the following weeks, he begins to engage in diversity and inclusion training, seeking to repair the harm he caused, now convinced that every person deserves to be seen and respected for who they are, regardless of their origins, past, or appearance. The restaurant Le Gourmet de la Ville, once a place marked by discrimination, is transformed through this memorable evening into a model of hospitality and respect. This transformation inspires other establishments to follow its example, convinced that inclusion and diversity are not just values to defend but principles to embody in every action and every decision. Charles, Maya, and all those who took part in this struggle know that they made a difference that night, and together, they commit to continuing the fight against discrimination, one meal at a time.